Greetings, my name is David, and I am a Norse pagan, or Germanic heathen, whichever you prefer. Welcome to the Sword of Siegfried channel, where I'm going to tell you all the amazing things about the most ancient and noble religion of heathenry. And today, we're going to do a pretty simple video. If you watched my video before, I gave you a little bit of an introduction to the ancient religion practiced by the Germanic peoples, my ancestors. And this is going to be a recommended book list. So, without further ado, let's get it on the road. I don't want to bore you with my ramblings. The most important book you must read. It is a mission from the gods to read this book if you're going to be a heathen. The Poetic Edda, people. The Poetic Edda. Read it. Don't pretend to read it. Just read it. Don't think to yourself, I'm going to pretend to read it and tell David I read it. No, read it. Seriously, for your own benefit. It's awesome. Even if you're not a heathen. Even if you're an atheist, Christian, Jew, Muslim, alien, I don't care. Read the Poetic Edda. It is the most valuable source of information we have from the ancient pagan peoples of the Germanic tribal regions. This includes all the major mythology, all the major stories, the death of Balder, Thor versus the giants, Odin's hanging from the world tree. That's an interesting one. All sorts of stuff. This is the primary source for our mythology. And actually, much of it goes back to pagan times. For example, the very first poem in it, which is called Voluspa, which means the prophecy of the seeress, or prophecy of the shaman, female shaman. It's great. Just read it. It's the best. My favorite poem, personally, a lot of heathens' favorite poems, is the Havamal, because it contains a lot of practical advice, supposedly from Odin himself. So yeah, definitely check into the Poetic Edda. It contains numerous stories about heroes, Sigurd, Guthrun, all sorts of good stories. This is our main source for Norse mythology, so please read it. Alright, so I'm going to try to go quick here. I want to give you as much sources as much as possible without the least amount of my personal information. So the next one that's important, is not as important, is the Prose Edda. The Prose Edda, written by a man named Snorri Sturluson. This provides more information on the mythology, more information about the gods, the goddesses. It's another great source of ancient Germanic mythology. Highly, highly recommend it. Although, please note, this was written by a confirmed Christian. Not as important as the Poetic Edda. So if you see any things that necessarily seem weird or out of place and seem more to fit in with the Christian mindset, specifically the medieval Catholic mindset, heaven and hell, salvation, any of those types of things that you wouldn't find within Norse heathenry, please make sure you note that. But if you watch out for those influences and don't get too worried about them and just take what this book says with a grain of salt and just keep your mind open, definitely a great source. Remember, not as important as the Poetic Edda, definitely important for your studies, so please read it. Next one, I would maybe rate even higher than the Prose Edda. This is a book written by a Roman pagan, a Roman historian, about the Germanic tribes 700 years before the Viking Age. So this is none other than Tacitus's work, Germania, and this book is fantastic. This book gives you so much reliable information about the Germanic tribes when they were literally the tribes of Germania, and the barbarians, right? You read this book, you'll quickly find out that the barbarians, our ancestors, the ancient Germanic peoples, were not even close to being barbarians. You find all sorts of things. Their social customs, the way they did their religion, the way they treated the opposite sex, the way they treated children, their honor code, their moral code, their faults, some of their faults, like they were known to be kind of lazy and not like to do a lot of hard work. They loved war. And whether if you see that as a fault, or you see that as a positive, I don't know. But very fantastic source. Highly recommended. It is a primary source. That means it's number one in importance. Definitely read this. Give you great insights. So, I'm going to give you some sagas here. Now, sagas, quick fun fact, sagas are a collection of works from medieval Iceland, written between 1100 and 1400, and the sagas are another great source of information, especially on Old Norse society and the way society interacted. I'm going to give you a quick viewpoint of about 4 sagas, and definitely read these, definitely highly recommended. If you can get your hands on any sagas that contain pagan elements that we can draw from, definitely read them. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the 4 sagas that I personally recommend, although I recommend any sagas. So, first one is the Saga of King Hrofskraki. This is one of the first sagas I ever read. It's great. It has fantastic things like Bodvar Bjarki, who is a bear warrior. It might be influenced by or connected to the Anglo-Saxon story of Beowulf, which is another recommended book that I do not happen to have, but read Beowulf. Beowulf, right? You know, talks about Odin, talks about wizards and sorceresses, gives you a glimpse into the pagan mindset, even if there are some Christian concepts in here, like God and things like that. It gives you definitely some insight into Old Norse society and mythology, as do most of the sagas. So definitely read the Saga of King Hrofskraki. Next one is extremely famous, one of my favorites. It's connected to my channel name. This is the Saga of the Volsungs. The Volsunga Saga. This saga speaks to my soul. This saga speaks to my heart. Sigurd, the story of the dragon Fafnir, the badass blacksmith Voland, it's all here. I mean, it's great. It's fantastic. Odin's in this. You know, it talks about Attila the Hun. It talks about, you know, all sorts of great things. The magic ring of power. This influenced Lord of the Rings. So if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, read this. If you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, read this. If you like books, read this. If you don't like books, read this. If you don't like anything and you're a weirdo, read this. It's fantastic. It's one of the best Norse stories ever. One of my favorites. Sigurd's a badass. You know, it's just great. Definitely Saga of the Volsungs. If you don't read any other saga, read Saga of the Volsungs. That's how badass it is. Next up, we have the Epic of Iceland. This is a super famous saga that pretty much everybody in Iceland should know about, and you should know about it too. It is Njal's saga, or the Saga of Burnt Njal. Now, this is a thick boy, okay, but it's an epic, and this one really gives an insight into Old Norse society itself. I mean, Volsunga Saga is great for mythology; it's fantastic, but this one really gives you kind of an insight into how society functioned, and blood feuds and family ties and inheritance and sort of that way of things, especially how it like functioned in society. So for that, and a great story. This is a great story. Definitely read the Saga of Burnt Njal, Njal's Saga. Fantastic. It's a thick boy. It's around 300 pages, around 300 pages. Definitely give this one a read when you have the chance. Primary source, get it. Next up, we have a fun one for you. This is the Saga of the Jómsvíkings. Anybody who's seen the anime Vinland Saga, you know what I'm talking about. This is Jómsvíkings. By the way, if you watch anime, if you don't watch anime, watch Vinland Saga. It's actually more accurate representation of Viking warriors than any modern Hollywood production. Pretty interesting, actually. Saga of the Jómsvíkings. This is fascinating because the Jómsvíkings are basically this group of badass warriors who sort of band together under this raven banner, right, the raven flag, and go off on adventures and fight and raid and kill and steal and do all the things Vikings do. But there's a theory going around that Jómsvíkings may actually be the precursor to the chivalric orders of medieval knighthood. So just for that alone, it would be fascinating. But the story itself is great. This is by translated by Lee M. Hollander. All the other sagas by Penguin Classics, but this one is by Lee M. Hollander, and he's a great guy. He also did a translation of the Poetic Edda, which is very fantastic. I should get that one. But Saga of the Jómsvíkings, definitely read it. I hope you like my recommendations for a lot of these books. That is definitely just the tip of the iceberg. There are way more sources that are important, although those are the most important ones, especially the first 3. But there's a lot more, and what I'm holding here isn't even the full length of it. So I hope that some primary sources for Heathenry can help you guys get into just basic Norse mythology, and I also hope that the couple videos I've produced have been helpful, at least a little bit, to any brand newcomers to the heathen path. So I just want you guys to remember that don't overthink it. Take your time. Read, 6 months or 1 week, whatever you feel like doing. But make sure you read Saga of the Volsungs, because I want you to, and if you don't, I'll find you. And make sure you read the Poetic Edda, because if you don't, I'll also find you. I'm not saying I'll kill you, it's just I'll find you, and we'll have like a cup of coffee, because I'm addicted to coffee. So, I want you guys to have a very good day, and let's hail.